Welcome to the Harmonic Convergence 2020. My name is Shariah Dharma. I'll be your host today in this conscious evolution segment on the Let's Get Visionary Day. And I'm so grateful to be here with my dear friend, Neil Gar of Portal to Ascension. Neil is the founder of Portal to Ascension and also a sound healer and sound alchemist, as well as MC Resonance. And Portal to Ascension is an online event hub for all things conscious, including ETs, extraterrestrial knowledge, and UFO science as well, and research, as well as ancient history and higher consciousness, all kinds of good things, really similar to all the vibe that's going on here at the Harmonic Convergence at Portal to Ascension. And Neil's got 300 speakers that he's worked with over the years and over 110 events every year, both online and offline. So Neil, welcome. It's so great to be here with you today and have this opportunity to drop in and talk about the power of sound.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Shreya. And I think it worked out perfectly that we're so connected and you're the one that has me on the platform. So I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Yes. What a treat. So let's talk a little bit about the alchemy of sound and the power of sound as it relates to our visionary nature or our ability to manifest our visions in the world. Would that be a good place to kick this conversation off?
Yeah, it is. And I can take it into the fact is that we are now proving that all things are made out of vibration and frequency, right? We have the discipline of quantum physics. And even though quantum physics comes from kind of this organizational element where they have their own agenda, really what quantum physics is, for lack of a better way of explaining it, is the science of vibration and frequency. So that's truly what we're talking about here. And they're now proving, and we're now witnessing the fact that even though we see ourselves as solid matter, we're actually vibrating frequencies, not even our atoms, but our subatomic particles are vibrating all the time. Therefore, everything is made out of the same energy. It's just a different calibration of frequency, which allows us to perceive it a certain way. So the only difference between me and this table, besides the sentient consciousness, is the fact that we vibrate differently. So that in lies the route into the curiosity of what else is possible. If we're now figuring out that we're all vibration and frequency, how can we utilize that awareness in science in order to better our future? And then also, how can we learn from the past and the ancients who also knew the same awareness?
And you've got those gorgeous pyramids behind you, which of course, there's a lot of stories about how perhaps they used sound to levitate the building blocks of that, or, you know, and obviously that was an energy device, a frequency device itself, the pyramids.
Yeah, actually, one of the individuals I've worked with, Brian Forster, he went to the Red Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, and he went in down the King's Chamber. There was a tunnel going down into the King's Chamber, one of those pyramids behind me. And when he went down there, he went with a few people, and they started chanting, just regular chants, not trying to hit any notes. And then they had a tuner where they could gauge what frequency the pyramid was giving back to them. And they had a piano to match that frequency, and it's on YouTube. And basically he found out that the frequency, no matter what you said or what chant you came up with in the pyramid, came back at A equals 432 hertz. So they definitely kept acoustics in mind when they were creating this. And all actually ancient sites, my wife and I go to Yucatan every year now. For the last 3 years we've gone. And the way they created their structures in order to harness sound is amazing. For example, you could be all the way at the one side of a complex and you could whisper, and we see things like this in the Integratron and all over, but this is like 3 football fields wide of an area. You could be talking in one area and you can hear the sound all the way on the other side. So the ancients not only might have used sound in order to create these structures, but it seems like there was some sort of harnessing ability in these structures as well to utilize sound. And some of the theories are that maybe it was using sound in order to create electricity, in order to maybe provide electricity to the community that we aren't aware of, and we think they didn't use it at that time. So they definitely had this understanding of frequency that was almost more acoustic and organic than we are using it now, because we're creating all these digital like external devices to do it, but they actually use just, you know, rock and architecture in order to create the same effect.
There's a temple, or maybe several temples in India I've seen on Praveen Mohan's show, at least one temple where they built the columns.
Yes.
You could play the temple itself becomes an instrument, and it's like out of solid rock they've carved these columns to be played. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's actually in my presentation on sound, the Ultimate Sound Frequency webinar. It's a 4-hour presentation I do on this, where we go through the ancient past, the present, quantum physics, extraterrestrials, future applications. I talk about that. And it's called the Temple of Vitala, I believe. And the Pillars of Hampi, I believe is the name of it. But the Vitala is actually is a deity that is Vishnu and Shiva combined. So it was worshipped by these individuals in that area. And yeah, when the British actually went there, you know, when they discovered this temple, like over almost 100 years ago now, they wanted to figure out why it was making those sounds. So they actually cut open some of the pillars, and all they found was just like straight up rock, right? So they had no idea how they actually created these in order to do it. But the interesting part is the frequencies. There's pillars that sound like different instruments, different Indian classical instruments, but they all have the same frequencies, but for the different instruments. So there's like the drum version of it. There's one that sounds like a sitar. There's one that sounds like the harmonium. And what it has is, what the frequencies are the sare gamma scale. So sare gamma is the solfege scale for the Eastern world, for India. And if you do enough research, you can soon find out that the Sarirama scale is actually based on the chakra system. So what they did was they not only made these pillars have these sounds of the Sarigama, but it started from the root chakra at the bottom and went to the crown chakra on the top. And the theory is that when it would rain or when wind would come through, the pillars would play just from the rain and from the wind, creating this frequency that's an all chakra bath. And people would meditate in that temple and get that frequency upload, right? And be able to connect to the divine. But I find it even more interesting that temple isn't that ancient. So this technology, like in the last few hundred years, is really in use. Whereas some of these structures are thousands of years old. So even something as recent as that temple, right? It's not too recent, but more recent than we're talking about ancient Egypt and all that. They actually use this technology as well. And to date, we can't figure out, like mainstream scientists have gone there and tried to find out how it's working like that. And they have no idea. Yeah. And another example would be in Palenque, very similar. My wife and I, Sol and I, went to Palenque last 2 years in a row. And in the main pyramid in the middle of Palenque, this pyramid was specifically for astronomers, philosophers, mathematicians, and politicians. That's where they would live. On top of this pyramid was an open stadium area where they would all gather to discuss matters of day-to-day life. The story goes, what has been said and hasn't been proven yet, but this is what ancient people from descendants from that time have been basically saying to us, is that before the whole of the Mayan Empire was created, a lot of people from all over the world would meet up on that pyramid, go to the top and discuss matters and kind of craft the Mayan Empire. And on top of this pyramid, and you can go and see it now, there was this stone slab, it was like a roof, right? So now the roof is caved in and they have the stone slabs all the way around this area. And you go up to it, and guess what? When you play it, it does the exact same thing as the temple in India. So what was happening there is the Mayans not only had a great understanding of acoustics and sound frequency, but they could create like epic air conditioning without using technology. The way they created the structure funneled the air through the whole place perfectly. So they made a wind tunnel specifically in that area that would make and hit the top of the temple where everybody was gathering, creating the sound frequency whenever it would rain or whenever there would be a lot of wind. So what was it doing? I went there, and we have a video of us on YouTube playing it. We played it, and it's such a beautiful harmonic frequency. So my theory is that they created it in order for, all these elite of society to go to, and then to be bombarded with these frequencies while they were discussing matters of civilization.
It's just continues to be remarkable and astounding that our culture still looks back and says the primitives from those times. It's like, when you start thinking about the advanced culture and technology that had to be in play to allow those things to be created, even the consciousness to know to do something like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, our culture is only just beginning to catch up to even the idea of frequency, much less building buildings which automatically with nature make that occur.
Yeah. And then to be able to do it without some sort of device, some sort of technology, I really can't wrap my head around how they could have done that unless they had some great understanding and perspective to imagine an entire civilization and how it's going to be laid out in order to harness certain frequencies. Mm-hmm. Is pretty amazing, right? Mm-hmm. Let's go back to Egypt, for example. Yeah. What in the documentary called The Pyramid Code that's on Netflix, highly recommend everybody watch it. Friends of Portal to Ascension that have worked with us, like Robert Schock, are on it. They actually show that underneath the pyramids behind me, there's actually copper tubes going into the ground, right? So, and into aqueducts. So copper tubes. So imagine that pyramid right there. You have 2 copper tubes going from into the ground at the bottom of each of those pyramids into aqueducts. So what are aqueducts for? They're for overflow of water. What we are now noticing through geological studies, that's why Robert Schock, the geologist, is key for this, is the Nile River was on the other side of the pyramid when it was actually in its main use. But through through geology and just through movement, basically now the Nile River is a complete different area than it used to be. But we can track back around 13,000 years ago, the Nile River was in use and on the other side of the pyramid. Every season or so, it would overflow. When it would overflow the Nile River, the water would go under the pyramids into the aqueducts, hit the copper rods, create an electrical current, go up the pyramids into a hollowed out shaft tube, creating a sound frequency going into the king's chamber. And this is proven now. So it's just not put out on mainstream Egyptian info, right? On TV, on documentaries, but enough people have come together to invest time and into research where they have now discovered that this is what was happening. So some people think that maybe it was creating a healing frequency and this was a healing chamber. Other people think that maybe it was creating this electrical current and then almost like a little battery, like a little electrical current going into the pyramid from the copper rods, creating some sort of thing to charge the pyramid up so that it can be used for whatever it was used for.
So as we're rediscovering these amazing organic, if you will, technologies from the past, how do you think that's going to inform us moving forward in our own conscious evolution now to embrace these really scientific principles more to enhance our lives and to solve our problems?
Yeah. Well, what does it mean for the fact that we're now witnessing the reality that we're not what we think we are? We're not solid matter. We are vibrating frequencies, but we see each other as solid. If we were to explore that a little more and see what kind of technologies we can get out of that, we could truly create and manifest a beautiful world, and even maybe manifest things out of magic, like out of thin air, so to speak, right? Because everything is frequency. How do we harness it? Even in Star Trek, when they have the thing that would create food, right? Manifest instant food. There are many applications to this, and we're basically now discovering the nature of reality that is beyond our physicality. And because we're discovering that nature of reality, we can now harness that information, those equations, that technology, the sacred geometry that is connected to these frequencies, and then come up with all types of technologies to heal and align us. Some of the most notable technologies that are coming out and will be coming out will be ones that can heal all types of ailments. Because not only are we all frequency, but guess what? So is the cancer in somebody's body. So is a state of consciousness. So is an emotional state. All of this is different types of vibrations and frequencies. So we could consciously, and the key is consciously, use this technology in order to better ourselves and to help heal and align ourselves. We could start really addressing mental issues that create turmoil for someone's life. We can help deal with cancers and other types of diseases that, you know, is not allowing this person to be the best version of themselves. And also we can couple that with the emotional release and the understanding of these lessons that it's really all about, because you can use frequency to heal cancer, but if you haven't learned the lesson of why this cancer was in your life in the first place, chances are it might just come back. And we witness that a lot. That's one of the most common things. Cancer is gone, comes back, you know, really aggressively. And so it's kind of a twofer when it comes to illnesses and the medical breakthroughs. But now let's talk about advanced technology, like the Secret Space Program is probably already using levitation, flying, quantum physics being utilized in spacecraft in order to bend space-time so that we can go faster than the speed of light. These are all in experimental phases right now. Some of them may sound like sci-fi, but it's really actually being implemented and used. And whistleblowers have come out and said, like, I'm actually being kind of conservative here with what I'm saying. Some whistleblowers have already come out and said that this technology, they have this, but beyond anything that we can even imagine. So once we start harnessing this and utilizing it, it could change the world. The key thing is that right now, the pharmaceutical industry, I feel, is so large, and the pharmaceutical industry has become so corrupt that a lot of these medicines that are quantum related that can heal you will not be utilized until we actually address the fact of the corruption within the pharmaceutical industry. And I feel that is kind of partly the reason why many of these technologies haven't taken off yet. Plus, there's a lot of money going in from our government in order to research pharmaceutical drugs. But if you look at how much is going into quantum physics and how many people are actually giving grants and donations to people that are experimenting with frequency devices, there's almost none. Almost all of them are self-funded. You know, Nassim Haramein has, been playing around with this kind of technology when he's trying to look for free energy devices. Michael Tellinger has been looking for people that are aware of quantum technologies in order to create free energy devices, meaning giving everybody abundant, free, clean energy all the time. But where are they getting the money from? Just from people that are into their work. There isn't a grant coming from the government like there is for all these other huge major corporations.
You know, what's interesting, though, Donald Trump just initiated a committee to study the quantum.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. And
yeah, that's
so
crazy.
we'll see what comes out of that, but it may be time to contact the White House with some of these resources around that, quite honestly, because he's asking for it.
That's amazing. I mean, the list really goes on, because truly we can use this technology in order to communicate to other dimensions. We could maybe even like go through a wormhole. That's also frequency and quantum technology. We could see where it takes us. We can send a drone in there. You know, as I said, all of this sounds sci-fi, but everything that we've ever seen on sci-fi, we've now done. And this is just the next real goal. Like, all of this stuff was predicting what we're able and capable of. And we're honestly, you know, as cliche as it might sound, we are capable of everything and anything, even manifesting things out of thin air and just creating this reality based on the level of consciousness that we have. Because ultimately, it seems that the human body is the best level of technology, that we have all these things that we're creating externally to manifest. We have the innate ability within us. And then that goes into, you know, junk DNA and why they call it junk DNA, and how if we activate those strands, we're able to communicate and interact with multiple dimensions rather than the limitations of these 3 dimensions. So these are all things that used to be new age, esoteric, community only, but within the last, I would say, like 3 to 4 years, especially, now all of this stuff that we've always known is a reality is being proven by mainstream science.
Yes, and it's like, once a culture understands the principles of a thing, then you can riff on it in any number of ways. And I'm thinking about frequency. You know, 2 of the ways that we, like, frequency is a big bundle of, you know, a lot of things are contained under that header, but it includes light and sound. And when we get into Vastu and the ancient Vedic sciences, you know, first there was the Om, and then from that came Om light and Om sound. That they were the second, and they were the first two manifestations of that original primordial Om sound energy, which is equivalent to what we call in the Western scriptures the word.
Yes.
In the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God. And again, that is a word. It's a verb. Word, verb are very similar sounds. It's like an active principle of sound emanation that causes creation to birth forth into reality.
Exactly. And that's a good segue into talking about creation stories and sound and vibration, because you just talked about one of the creation stories, which is the most common, right, and the most well known, which is from John 1:1, right? In the beginning was the word, and the word was sound. So I'm gonna read from this right here, and this is from a slide from one of my presentations, and we're gonna break down what you just said, Shreya. Okay, so in the Bible, John 1:1, this is how it goes down. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the Word. What is Word? The Word is sound. So it's saying in the beginning was the sound, and the sound was with God, and the sound was God. So now we have the first universal paradox right off the bat, first line. The Word was not only with God, two separate entities together, the sound and God, but sound was also God. He was with God in the beginning. So in conventional, Christianity, people start thinking he is Jesus, or we're talking about God. But
On that one.
What's that? Yeah, no, exactly. So if we're following it, who are we talking about here? We're talking about the Word. He is the Word, sound. Sound was with God in the beginning. Through him, who's him, sound, all things were made. Without sound, nothing was made that has been made. And you look at creation stories, I have a presentation I just finished on creation stories, and I have a whole section on sound and vibration. And this is really common, that before sound, there was nothing that was material. Through sound and frequency, all things material manifested, and it's right here again. In him, who's him, sound was life. In sound was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. So now we're talking about the fact that sound was here before light, and from sound came light. And then the last one goes, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. So this last one here is talking about the splitting of darkness, splitting of the worlds, and we get that all over the place. So sound and vibration is everywhere. And just to add to that, there's other just a few other places that also talk about sound and vibration. Shreya, you mentioned Om. Yeah, Om is the initial sound, and in Vedic awareness, they believe that the frequency and the sound of the universe is Om. We have the Australian Aborigines who speak of the three sacred songs. They have the song paths sung by the primordial ancestor spirits who walked across their landscape, singing its lands into formation. So they were a sound walking across the landscape of nothingness, of emptiness, singing all the lands into formation. And then we have, the six solfeggio tones, the six aspects of Om. And this one you might have find familiar. It would be, in the beginning was Brahman, with whom was with the Word, and the Word is Brahman, the Krishna Ayurveda, right? So
exactly saying exactly the same thing.
Exactly. And I like this example in particular because, in Christianity, if you were to tell a conventional Christian that you have similarities to Hinduism and Vedic information, many of them would get upset, and a lot of them actually think that anything pagan, even though Hinduism technically isn't pagan, but it has been classified like that from conventional religious people, that how could there be any type of connection there? They worship all these gods, we're monotheistic. But the fact is, this is almost the exact same, it is the exact same thing. Instead of God, it's Brahman, and Brahman is God. And it's saying the same phrase here. So throughout antiquity, throughout history, sound and vibration is really implemented into all creation stories. And it also represents the fact that before God even existed, right? You look at the Greek mythology, for example, it says that sound existed before the gods. Sound created the world of the gods. That's one of the lines in Greek mythology. So obviously there's something amazing there within sound. So let me just add this caveat to this whole thing. We can't like hear all sounds. We have a range of frequencies that we're able to perceive. Just like your eyes can only see certain things on the light spectrum, but we know there's stuff outside of those spectrums because we have technology that can quantify and view it. So is the same thing for what you can hear. You can only hear within a certain frequency range, which is why dogs, for example, can hear dog whistles and humans can't hear it because they can hear a different frequency range. So just that fact alone made me curious to, if we now can prove that there are frequencies besides what we can hear and see, what are those frequencies? What do they represent? What's within those frequencies? So when we're talking about sound, we're not talking about just what you can hear. We're talking about frequencies that on some level have an audible component to it, but we're just unable to perceive it at this moment. So this frequency that might have existed in the universe before we even manifested could have been a sound that if we were around back then, we couldn't even hear, but still existed. And case in point here is, now look at the number one creation story of it all, the Big Bang. What is the Big Bang? Even in the title, the Big Bang, we have a sound. And even in cosmology, they say that before the Big Bang occurred, everything was in the tiniest singularity in the form of a cosmic egg, which you find in creation stories everywhere. And this egg cracked and opened, letting out this huge explosion in this Big Bang. Maybe it wasn't an explosion. Maybe it wasn't like a nuclear bomb or TNT, but maybe it was just an expulsion, of frequency coming out of this central singularity, going out into the entire universe. And what is universe? It also represents a song, one verse, one song, and manifested this whole reality. And I'm starting to think that it's more and more likely, because you can draw parallels to mythology and metaphoric scriptures and draw parallels to what we're saying in the mainstream, and you can just see that it's just a different way of explaining the same thing.
Word up to the word.
Yeah, exactly, huh?
And when you're talking about Brahma, the Brahmanic scriptures saying the same exact thing as the Christian scriptures, we can also just look, like, if just observe what's actually going on. Yeah. And many times you'll see Jesus with a mudra, something like this. And then, of course, we've got the mala beads, like the rosary. And, so in other words, the similarities go on and on and on and on and on. And some people feel that that being we call Jesus, who represents that set of teachings, that he actually studied in India.
Yeah.
And so that those primordial ancient teachings are all coming from a common global spiritual civilization that knew these advanced physics technologies. And then they got religified, and they got ritualized, and they got mythologized, and they had overlays added to obfuscate these very simple basic truths of physics, because the ancients knew science and spirituality were actually one and the same.
Yeah, which is why I like to say that religion and science has been separate for so long, and now we're finding out we are almost bridging the two worlds together through the science of vibration and frequency. Because before they were separate, because one was talking about this world that we can't see, but physics was talking about everything that we can perceive in the physical realm. But then as soon as we started stumbling upon the subatomic reality and realized everything is frequency and quantum, all of a sudden, all of the ancient scriptures started making more sense, especially the Vedic scriptures in the Hindu texts and Buddhist texts and Eastern religions and ancient Sumerian texts and Egyptian texts, and then an argument can be made from some people that, oh yeah, those are ancient pagan religions and we've changed it now. And it's not the same. We now believe in this reality. But then if you look at those religions, such as the three major religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and you look at where they got their texts from, then you start realizing, wait a second, they actually got all their information from these ancient texts that were talking about vibration and frequency, except the components that could disclose who you are were taken out. And yeah, the Urantia book is a great book that actually talks about Jesus's life in India and how he was a tutor to this child there. And so there is a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of information was taken from India, and Jesus brought it back to basically the Western world and used this information in order to bring it forward in his teachings. He's also, just to add to that before we move into another example that I want to give you on ancient sounds, is actually I don't know if you've ever heard this, but Jesus and Krishna are actually one and the same. They're the same person, right? But they didn't exist at the same time. They're the same soul, because if you go on the internet and you search Jesus and Krishna similarities, every single thing about Jesus is the same as Krishna. Krishna was born to a virgin mother. His dad was a carpenter. He was known as the savior to his people. The list goes on. Like, there's like 20 of them. So when I found that out, I was like, okay, either Christianity is complete farce, because we know that these texts are actually older than Christianity, or they're taking the stories from these older texts and they're repurposing it for this moment. And Jesus never existed in 2,000 years ago, but was an older story, right?
I do have a theory about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, what I can sense so far is that Yeshua, the person, was kind of like a high priest who did study and had a wife called Magdalene, and there was an overlay of Krishna, Zoroaster, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, all these other pre-existing stories that were the same story got bundled up and put on top of what this being Yeshua was trying to bring forward, for the purpose of creating it as a religion that could then be utilized to manage the population, if you will.
So
and yet still keep the ancient codes of the ancient religions in play and in place symbolically, because that ritual symbolic power is also how they were, how the powers that were controlling things.
Yeah, so you think maybe like Constantine or something around that time, Council of Nicaea, basically took other stories and put it into the Jesus story, right?
Yes, exactly. And there's a number of researchers who talk about that. I don't have their names on the tip of my brain right now, but I've studied some of those things, and I was like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because like you're saying, the stories are almost practically identical, just different settings.
So we've been sharing stories with each other since the dawn of time, right? And right now we're basically a mutt of civilization, and it's beautiful. But there is an invested interest in saying that we're separate, and these places actually grew independently of each other. But the more and more we do research, the more we realize that we've been exchanging stories for a long time. And ancient civilizations, there's even evidence to suggest that ancient Egyptians actually came through the Americas and had a settlement out over here. So these are things that we hope someday soon are actually going to come out to the masses. And as you know, one of the key components of Portal to Ascension is true world history. And what true world history is, it's been known as alternative history for so long, but it's truly not only prehistory, the history before the history books, but it's the history as we can see it based on the evidence that is now manifesting, because a lot of evidence is going against the conventional timeline that we've been told and that we've been taught in school. But it seems that anything that comes out that goes against that conventional timeline is just swept under the rug. And we can speculate as to why they're doing that. Maybe there's a controlled narrative in order to stop this information coming out because it could empower us. Or maybe it's just simply that archaeologists are afraid to lose their career and they need to stick to certain narratives, or they'll be ridiculed in the community. I'm kind of leaning on to the fact that it's both of those. But now the alternative archaeology movement is really becoming so big because things can't be disproven. And a good example is the Great Flood, how Noah's flood actually occurred, and many different civilizations talk about this. And we're now discovering that this flood probably occurred around 13,000 years ago. So soon enough, and some journals are talking about it, but soon enough, our history books are going to have to be rewritten, and we're going to have to teach people not only the true history, but also how sound and vibration was utilized by these ancients, or what kind of information they knew.
Yeah, and how can we, in this next couple minutes here, we got a little bit of time left here. What do you think is the best way for people right now today to begin to apply this knowledge and this information. I mean, for example, Dan Winter said, was it Dan Winter? Oh no, I think it was Dr. Todd that I was interviewing, mentioned just the simple act of humming us back in resonance with ourselves, and that, you know, that kind of toning and humming. And what are some other ways that people can leverage this power of that primordial sound for
Yes.
healing and awareness and conscious evolution, and even maybe protection, like EMF protection, aura
Yeah.
protection?
So that's a great question, because humming is actually the best way. So through my research of ancient sound technology and sound instruments, I started finding that many instruments weren't actually originally created for entertainment. Most instruments from the ancient past were originally created for healing purposes, or for syncing the group, or doing some sort of activity in harmony with each other. So, and the interesting part was, many of these instruments were actually trying to mimic what we were doing with the human voice. You know, Mongolian instruments, for example, they had this double octave throat chanting that they were doing, and they actually mimicked the local waterfall, and then they tried to create an instrument that was mimicking their voice. So the original tool for sound and empowerment and healing was our own voice. But then as we evolved, we started creating all these instruments external from us that had the same type of effect. So before I move on to the other part of your question, I really want to zero in on humming is one of the best ways. Jonathan Goldman created this book, and he's actually, like, you know, he is one of the greatest, I would say, when it comes to sound and vibration science and information, and creating books for the Western world to really understand what this is. He has this book called The Humming Effect. And what happens is, I forget the name of this mineral nutrient that gets created in your body, but it starts with an N. Forget it right now. But when you create this, when you hum, and you hum correctly, because there's actually a way to hum in order to create resonance in your nasal cavity, you start creating this nutrient that is natural to the human body, but gets depleted. And in certain illnesses such as dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, it's actually a depletion of that starts decaying certain parts of your body. So now people are being recommended in the esoteric spiritual community. You know, mainstream won't tell you this. If you have Parkinson's, you go to a regular doctor, they'll just say, try to slow it down with these pills. But it's actually having an effect when people are humming in order to relieve those types of symptoms. So that's just one component of it all. If you were to hum and chant the different chakra sounds, you can activate certain parts of your body. You can even come up with your own humming and your own chants with your own, like, just freestyling it. And if you're in tune with yourself and your body, you can direct that energy in certain parts of your body, and you can feel it. And I've done this like multiple times. So it's truly one of the most amazing things ever. So now, to answer your question about how we can use all this and what other types of tools and technologies can we utilize for ourselves right now, you know, everything is sound and frequencies. Therefore, what you ingest visually, emotionally, physically, when you put in your mouth, all has a vibration and frequency too. The whole component of higher vibration and lower vibration isn't a literal terminology. We're not literally saying that 1,000 hertz is better than 2.4 hertz. It's not that. It's just the way we explain it, higher, evolving. Because there are lower frequencies, for example, the Schumann resonance, that have great healing components to your on your body, and alkalines your body, oxygenates your cells, but it's a very low frequency. But then we have a disharmonic frequency at 440 hertz, which is technically higher, but isn't really doing anything for you or being harmonious for you. So it's not, it's raising your vibration in the metaphorical state. We're saying that metaphorically, but we don't literally mean go from 0 to 2,000. Okay. So when you're, so what you can do right now in order to create harmony within yourself is listen to harmonious frequency tones. You know, there's music that utilizes frequencies and harmonies, and then there's certain types of genres that are really harmonic. But then there's also binaural beats on YouTube, where you can pretty much search almost any ailment or physical ailment or emotional ailment, like OCD even, like binaural frequency for OCD. and you can find frequencies that people have experimented with that have actually helped people relieve those types of symptoms based on listening to that. So what I do a lot is I listen to a lot of frequencies. I listen to delta frequencies when I go to sleep at night sometimes, especially because it gets loud like around where I'm at. So there's a lot of noise outside sometimes. So I put on delta frequencies, and when you're in a deep state, what brain frequency is your brain in? It's in delta. So if you're listening to delta frequency, it has an effect to actually put your brain into a delta frequency sooner than if you were to just do it on your own. So you can utilize this in order to get certain types of experiences. Now, when it comes to food is also vibratory in frequency. Herbs are really great frequencies in them. If you put a food into a microwave, it actually distorts the frequency of the food, and the nutrients don't have the same frequency that they should have had originally. And now you eat that food, you're eating that frequency. So what you're ingesting, what we really need to move into this new world that is now manifesting, it would be great, because unfortunately it seems that most people won't make changes unless someone with some sort of authority figure that is accepted by society tells them that this is the way to go. And right now, even though the media is going out and everybody's looking at it and seeing how corrupt it is, unless the media really tells you this is what to do, people won't do it. And the good example is the coronavirus. If the media focused on telling people about how to increase the immune system and what they could do in order to help make sure that they don't get sick, and gave people a list of different things they can eat, ingest, even talk about colloidal silver, right? If the media was to tell people about all those things that can help boost your immune system using frequency medicine, most people in the world will start doing it, because now someone with authority has told you to do it. If the CDC released this as well, a lot of people do it. Some of us just do our own research anyway, but the collective won't do it. So we really are working on changing the way information is released to the masses and taking our power back and creating our own platforms so that we can inform the world on these different tools and techniques that they can use to heal and empower themselves all the time and keep themselves, feeling good and full of life. So I think that kind of answers your question, right?
Yeah. And so when we think about frequencies of things like food, and we hearken back to sound is what created everything that exists, then the foods have a sound ultimately, I guess you could say.
And if you like, if you give me a moment here, I can read this quote that kind of explains that. I like this quote. This right here is the reason why I chose sound. Okay, so here's this quote. Let's see if I can get it here. So this goes to your point that you just said right now. So frequency, when I'm talking about frequency, I'm talking about sound and vibration, because that's what it's creating. It's emanating a frequency, it's emanating a vibration. So why did I choose sound as like my entrance into presenting on every topic, including ETs? Well, this quote really says it all. The forms of snowflakes and faces of flowers may have taken on their shape because they are responding to some sound in nature. Likewise, it is possible that crystals, plants, and human beings may be in some way music that has taken on visible form. Everything is sound, everything is, and I like that, like we're all music, we're all harmonious frequencies manifesting into physical form. And that's the same thing with everything you eat, your thoughts, your emotions. You're emanating feelings all the time. You're emanating love. You're sending that frequency out. If a lot of people can pick up on those frequencies, especially if you're within someone's auric field, and you can even communicate with them and communicate your emotions. And a lot of empaths actually pick up on those frequencies. And what is it? You're emanating some sort of sound that is inaudible, that is a frequency that is going out of your consciousness in your body, and other people are able to pick up on it. And you probably noticed like this a lot, like you being so intuitive that you can pick up on people's thoughts and emotions and feelings and their state of being. And it's really a frequency game.
Mm-hmm. And also the words we speak literally is sound,
Exactly.
Sound print. It's like the act of sound, the essence of sound being imprinted with a pattern, which is coming from your thought and the words that you're speaking and what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
And then that becomes a conditioning element to one's own vessel, because we're speaking them, as well as to those around us and our world.
Yeah. So you're right. So to add to all those other tools, one of the greatest ones is watch how you communicate with not only others, but yourself. because you're creating those spells in every single moment and you're manifesting that reality.
Spelling and sentences. Well, wow, there's so much richness here and so much more to be discovered, Neil. I think this is a good time to talk about Portal to Ascension and what you do and how they can find out more about how they can go down some of these rabbit holes a little further, because we've just opened up a bunch and I'm sure people's curiosity is totally piqued now.
Yeah. So Portal to Ascension, just to give you guys the Cliff Notes version, the quick version, in 2001 is kind of my awakening moments where I got into Nassim Haramein, Jim Self, William Henry, Jordan Maxwell. Those are my entrance into this awareness. Through them, I discovered the Sumerians. Through the Sumerians, I discovered they were talking about sound and frequency. Then I drew parallels and connections to Hinduism and the Vedic texts because they had very similar stories about vibration and frequency. So after around 6 years of going down the rabbit hole of this awareness and going hardcore into extraterrestrial awareness from 2000, 2006, I created a group on Facebook called 2012 Consciousness, Mind Evolution, and Presence. Over 2 years, this group morphed names and thousands of people were joining. I created a Portland chapter, a New York chapter, a California chapter, UK, Canada, just kept growing. In 2008, I changed the name to Portal to Ascension because I had a dream that was what I was supposed to call it. So I changed the name. I submitted it to Facebook fan pages and they approved it, and then the name Portal to Ascension was created, and we created our first event at Ginger's Garden in Costa Mesa, California, where she gave me the opportunity to experiment with creating events. So I would create holistic fairs, small meditation events. By 2010, this went into full-on ET channeling tours up and down the coast to Canada, down to San Diego, sound and vibrational healing tours, and all-day ancient alien conferences with speakers such as Laura Eisenhower. At that time, I worked with Mike Barra as well, Dr. Dream, William Henry, and a few other people. I was creating all-day ancient alien conferences. And so we were creating events sporadically until around 2012, when we created the Cosmic Reunion 2012. That was the milestone event, our first 3-day conference. And were you at the 2012 one or the fourth density? You're the 2012, right?
I was at the Cosmic Reunion.
Because we had two. We had the 2012 and then fourth density. I think you were at the first one.
I think it was the first one, yeah. And
yeah.
I was.
So Shreya was the MC host in 2012, and that was our first real connection together. Even though you'd known my friend, you'd known Ilya for a while, right? So you hosted it. That was the milestone event. That was making us realize we'd created such a huge community. I made friends with all these speakers. Let me create this event. So created that. A few months later, created another conference, and from then just kept creating events and events. The live events weren't able to sustain my business model. So around 5 to 6 years ago, I scratched all live events and I went 100% online, creating what we have now, which is the Portal to Ascension, basically a university of conscious awareness, where I've worked with over 300 speakers. I've been saying that for a year. So right now it's probably 400 plus. And every month, new speakers, and created since the inception in 2018, I'd hit the 1,000 event mark. So right now we're probably at around 1,200 to 1,300 events, 110 events a year. 80% of them are online, 20% of them are live. So we have a few new live productions coming out next year, like the California Cannabis Conference, the Oakland Psychedelic and Awareness Conference, True World History Conference in Atlanta, live events. And then every single week, we have a different webinar, a presentation with amazing speakers on every topic I've honestly been able to have the opportunity to think about. Oh, this is an interesting thing to go into. Let me create an event on it. Let me see who can I gather to speak on it. So we do many solo workshops, right? For example, did a solo workshop with Laura Eisenhower 2 weeks ago. Quite a few people turned out, and 4 hours of her just going deep into her information. And then I did a conference with Laura Eisenhower, John D'Souza, and Michael Sala last weekend. And that was a 9-hour conference called Ascension, Exopolitics, and Disclosure, which is like the Trinity right there, So these are just some examples. So what I've created is not only a website where we have, online events, live events, tours, including a trip to the Yucatan next year, and conferences for all these live conference productions. But our back end is kind of like a Netflix for consciousness, where there's over 2,000 hours right now of free presentations because I've created so many presentations. I have over 10,000 hours of footage that I've created since the inception of me actually creating events. 2,000 hours of them are for free to watch right now. You basically go to our website, sign up, you get a username and password emailed to you that you can change when you log in, and you can search by everything's in thumbnails. You can search by speaker, you can search by category topic. You could type things into the search bar to look for keywords. You could add things to your watch list. You can continue watching it later. There's a documentaries area, there's an interviews area. I finally figured out a way in order to harness all the content that we've created and show it in one place. And now we have become a one-stop shop for all things consciousness. And the goal is that as people are waking up, they're going to need an outlet to go to. And we've created a central hub where you can pretty much get like a wide range. I'm never going to say everything because there's so much more out there, but it's a huge range of information that is constantly expanding. Plus, we utilize feedback from the users and from the attendees to create other events. Twice a year, I send out a survey where I get people's feedback on what they want to see and present as they want. So we're constantly growing and evolving based on what the masses want us to bring forward to them, plus things that I'm just interested in anyway, right? So
well, it's amazing. I mean, my goodness, yeah, I recommend everybody go to portaltoascension.com, and unfortunately we're out of time now. And yet, of course, I think go visit the website because you can dive in many rabbit holes. Like you said, there's so much free content as well as paid opportunities to take workshops and do other types of events. And it's just wonderful to work with you over the years, Neil. And I'm so glad that we had a chance to commune a little bit today on these topics and drop in. And just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Shreya. My pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And I'm really honored to be part of this event. Take care.
Likewise. And so this is Shreya Dharma signing off for the Harmonic Convergence 2020 today on Let's Get Visionary. And we certainly did get a little visionary here, looking from the past to the present and into the future. And so thank you again, Neil.